Welcome to Reclaiming Our Natural Connections with Jon Young. Visit us on the web at owlinkmedia.com.
The story that I want to share is a story that came to me very recently about a person who'd been on this planet 50, 60 years. I won't tell you where they're from or who they are, but this story really represents something that I've heard a lot of in the last few years, and it just points at something that I think we're all aware of, but maybe we don't take time to think about or talk about with others. But I would just like to create a little space now and just say, let's invite this awareness among ourselves. This individual had, for the last 30 years, been experiencing some difficulty in his emotional, spiritual awareness life, that he just was on a medication for many years. For 30 years or so, he's been taking this medication and finally realized one day that he just didn't want to do that anymore. But he didn't really want to wake up to the sound of the world around him either. And so he started to do some nature awareness experience work, and he was spending time getting to know the deer in his yard and wandering around a little bit. He saw some birds that really encouraged him and caught his eye, some songbirds that lived in the brush, and he started to find that just these few minutes that he spent with him each day, and it was only a few minutes a day because he's a busy guy, has a full-time job, and got a family to support, he started to notice that there was a change in the way he felt about his life. And he started to get a feeling inside himself that he hadn't felt since he was 9 or 10 years old, and it was a kind of remembering, what does it feel like to be alive on this earth? And he realized that for decades he had shut that off, and now he wanted it to come back. But when he turned on the switch and got the feelings back again, they were too loud for him at first, and he started to really think about, how can I work with this? And he began to engage in a mentoring process in nature, where he would go outside and look around a little bit and come back in and ask himself questions and look in field guides and maybe get on the internet and look up an animal or a plant or a bird. And over the course of a couple of years, he found he was able to re-engage with the world again. And that's when he said, I feel like I don't want to take this medication anymore. And so he started working with his health practitioner, and they began to work on releasing his relationship with this chemical dependency that he had developed for so many decades. And it was difficult at first, and it was painful for him, but with the help of his health practitioner and with nature and with his relationship to building his awareness again with the animals and the plants and the trees, he suddenly found himself home again. And when I heard this, I just about broke into tears, because I realized that these simple things that we take for granted, learning about a flower or enjoying watching a hummingbird at a beautiful red flower on your back deck or something, or watching a dragonfly skim over a pond, these things we can take them for granted, but for some people they haven't had those things in so long they forgot what it's like. But that it's medicine for people. It's a form of nutrition and health that, like in the old days when we thought we didn't really need calcium for our bones, just a few decades ago, people didn't think there was such a thing as nutrition. A lot of people thought it was just, silliness, but now everybody knows, oh yeah, you have to have calcium for your bones. I also think we're in an age now where people are starting to wake up to the fact that nutrition is also spiritual, and that having relationship with animals and plants and birds and trees is a way of getting nutrition for your being. And that optimal health can be achieved, through taking vitamins and eating good food and getting exercise, but without that nature connection, something is missing. And that the most vital health there is to be attained is yet to be experienced without that connection. And I hear story after story, and I gather from 100 different affiliates now worldwide, these kinds of stories are coming in. People are really, truly experiencing another level of health and happiness due to their relationship with nature. And so we're here to think about, to celebrate, to share stories, to share teachings, and little tools that we can use to reintegrate nature into our lives in a way that can bring us back to the most optimal health and happiness that we can experience on this earth. You know, some days we wake up in the morning and we get out the door and we head on to work, and, you know, we get 3/4 of the way across the driveway before we realize we're even outside. And sometimes that first awareness that we're outside is because we stepped on something or hit a puddle. And then we're like, oh yeah, I got to pay attention. And we get in the car and we drive 3/4 of the way to work before we realize that we're driving. And for our minds, they're so busy working on the problems of the day, or maybe the problems of yesterday, or maybe the problems of last week, or the challenges of tomorrow, you know, or reviewing again and again that conversation you had with somebody yesterday. And then we get to work and we get inside and we just get at it, and, you know, the day goes by, the clock tells us it's time to go home, and, you know, we can go on like this for years. And somebody recently said to me, you know, I retired after 30 years, and it's been a few months now that I stopped working. And I thought about something that really scared me, and it was that those last 30 years, I cannot separate them into separate days, but my memory makes them one day. It's like one solid memory of work, but it only occupies one day's worth of space in my consciousness, and it's like I never really did anything for 30 years. But the other things that I really remember are the times that when I was out with my friends, doing something I've never done before, the moments with my family, and those are the things that really stay with me, and it's almost as if that work thing never really happened. You know, I really reflect on that, and I reflect on a lot of things that after, you know, this 2008 marks the 25th anniversary of my work as a nature mentor. It's the 25th anniversary of Wilderness Awareness School, a school I started in 1983, and, you know, it marks 25 years of me watching people on this journey and working in some cases with people as long as 25 years. And for me to see the impact long-term of these relationships with nature on people's lives is to be able to say to you without any uncertainty in myself at all that you really need to have relationships with nature, and not informational relationships, but a much deeper and more holistic relationship with nature. And that's what we're going to really explore now. So what about, you know, the work? What about the 30 years? I don't really think, you know, in talking to this individual, we chatted about it some, we don't really think it's necessarily that you were at work for 30 years that the whole thing disappeared into one memory, but that you allowed yourself to fall into a way of experiencing the moments where you didn't really experience the moments. And what you were doing instead was thinking about last week, or thinking about the conversation, thinking about what's tomorrow, thinking about a lot of different things, but not noticing you're outside until you step in the puddle, or maybe on the banana slug. You know, and that's when you say, whoa, I better slow down here. And, you know, I'm as guilty as the next person here. I work a lot of hours every week coaching people on this journey, and sometimes I'm many steps out the door before I realize I'm outside too. And it has to do with, you know, what we make important, and it has to do with what kind of reminders we have, and it has to do with the culture that we set up around ourselves that will help us succeed in bringing more power into our awareness in life, or fall back into the same pattern again, so that 30 years later we realize that, whoops, we probably should have done a better job organizing our cultural experience in our life here. So ultimately, you know, what I hope to achieve in this session with y'all is to provide for you a set of tools, a way of building some things into our everyday life, some skills, some tools, some awareness, some stories, some information, some research, all of which adds up to some new patterns that we might invite into our experience and try on. You know, I'm not claiming that, you know, this is like the way, that there's something here that I have that you can just open up and read it and do it exactly this way and it's going to work for you. Rather, what I have is principles. And these principles are solid wisdom gained not only from my own direct experience, but the experience of hundreds of others who are also mentoring folks in nature, and also related to the skills of passing awareness between generations, which has been my fascination for the last 30 years. How do skills of awareness, skills of connection to nature pass between generations so smoothly in some cultures and don't pass at all in other cultures? And I happen to be living in a culture right now, and maybe you too, where we haven't got a great track record for passing awareness from generation to generation. Maybe I'm getting salty and cynical in my older age, but I really feel like, maybe in the last couple of decades, we've actually gotten worse at passing awareness between generations and not better. And that worries me a little bit. I'm not hopeless about it. I have a lot of hope because I see a movement growing in this land right now, and also around the whole Northern Hemisphere and different parts of the world. It's starting to catch on, where people are actually consciously choosing awareness again and figuring out ways to weave awareness back into their communities, into their life, into their everyday processes, so that the 30-year work journey is a journey of awareness. They're not one or the other. But how can we weave awareness back into our everyday experience and make it a meaningful part of that? The thought that occurs to me that creates this whole need for this conversation to even exist is one about what is it to be a human being? What does it mean? And I'd like to look at it from the point of view of health and nutrition for a second and just say the way we defined ourselves as human beings just a few decades ago, and my friend Gary likes to say, we used to think that we could put a rubber belt on our butts and turn on a machine and get jiggled and we'd lose weight and get healthy that way. Or, like I said before, you don't really need to eat calcium. That's just a farce. But now, people are all understanding that, it really takes exercise to be healthy in our physical body, and it takes good food and in some cases supplements to, have health in our biochemistry. And that it also, I'm saying, takes some nutrition in terms of your relationship and connection to nature to have a healthy consciousness or mind. And what does it mean to be a human being? I mean, why is that so? It's not so hard to see it. You can understand that deer are very vital and powerful beings, and you wouldn't want to wrestle a white-tailed deer in close quarters. If you think they're weak and kind of slow and lazy, just try to wrestle one sometime and be reminded what it feels like to grapple with the power of a wild being. They know what to eat. They know how to eat. They gather the food from the landscape. In their wandering around, they eat just the right things for themselves, and they get strong, and they get powerful, and they exercise themselves. And, from their relationship to the world around them, from the natural world around them, they get everything they need. They get the water, they get the food, and they're very strong beings as a result. They're so vital. And when you interact with them at close range, and when you spend time in nature and you watch them, you just can't help but admire how powerful and beautiful they are, especially when you watch a whitetail stand up against a 6-foot fence, and you think, aha, you're trapped against the fence, and you walk a little closer, and all of a sudden he surprises you by crouching just a little bit, and in one clear bound just goes right up and over the top, and it doesn't even faze him, and he just goes up and over the fence like it's not even there. And you're thinking to yourself, wow, I don't think I could do that. And then you watch, just how healthy and strong a squirrel is when it runs up a tree. I always pause and just stand in amazement. Sometimes I get tired running up a flight of stairs, but these guys are running up a vertical tree. And, did you ever think about that? What it would feel like to run up a tree straight up using your fingertips? It's not easy to do, but these guys are healthy. And boy, if we could have that kind of health, if we could have that kind of vitality, if we could have that kind of strength, what we could do. And, I admire the wild things, and I see how powerful they are and how strong they are. But you know what they have that we don't? They have connection with nature. By definition, they have it. And I say that because, I've had plenty of fat house dog that I bring in the car and take them out to the Pine Barrens, and we drive along a dirt road for a little while, and within 15 minutes, they're completely wasted. And they look like they're going to die, the poor things, so I have to kind of put them back on the car seat. I'm thinking, well, I better not exercise you too much, But I've also had then house dogs when I had a farm back in 1983 when I first started Wilderness Awareness School. And this this one dog I had, Scout, he pretty much ran for a living. He just loved to run. And he was really trim and lean, and I thought, yeah, maybe I could raise this guy to be more like a wild animal, just for fun. So I worked on that. I fed him a lot more wild foods that I had, roadkill things and stuff like that, and gave him regular food too, but tried to keep him lean on the regular food and try to get him as much wild stuff as I could, as much like the foxes and coyotes diet locally as I could possibly give him. And I kept thinking, okay, he's a relationship to the wolf, so I'll try to give him some more big game. Then I took him to the Pine Barrens and I just let him run alongside my truck. And I always watched him pretty carefully and said to myself, okay, if he starts to look tired and if his tongue really hangs out, I'm going to let him come in the truck and rest, like one of the older, fatter dogs I had before this. So I figured, Scout, any day now you're going to get tired and want to get in here. But Scout was an outside dog. He spent all his time outdoors when we weren't down in the Pine Barrens driving around. He was on a nice farm in a rural county north of the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, and he just spent his days tripping around on the landscape. When I brought him to the Pine Barrens and tried to tire him out, he didn't really get tired. And he found this rhythm in his trot that he could maintain all day and all night. And I hold that out to you because, I was really putting him through nature mentoring in a certain respect. I was trying to maintain his connections to the original source of all life for all things. And when I did that with him, it was the best exercise program I could have given him. But it was a lot more than just nutrition and exercise. It was a form of biomimicry, really. How can I imitate the way of the fox or the way of the coyote or the way of the wolf for this dog and give him a rich experience? And I started to realize that I had given him such a powerful and beautiful experience. In some ways, I started to feel jealous of him because I was trying to learn to be a tracker and naturalist myself at that age, and really model something to the young people I was working with. And, Scout definitely had it over on me. But the nice thing was that Scout and I were a good team, and we formed a partnership. I learned a lot from watching him, and he was willing to learn from me too, and we learned to communicate silently, and we could spend time out in the forest together, going out and sitting alone in quiet places. We could even walk up on deer together, and he would sit behind me real patiently. He didn't have to chase them, although he couldn't resist chasing groundhogs for some reason. Just don't know what that was. But we learned a lot, from watching each other, and I learned so much thinking about him as a symbol. What kind of nutritional experience was he getting? The nutrition of the energy of his life was that connection to nature. He seemed to draw power from it, and he seemed to have endless energy from it. And he could run all day. And I started to realize that his tracks that he left on the ground began to resemble the tracks of the wolf and the coyote, in that he was very deftly depositing one foot right on top of the other in a very, very clean, direct registered trot, or a side trot that might as well have been a wolf. So I started to see the wild characteristics emerging in this dog, yet I also saw that he was fully the dog in relationship with the human. And in that way, his wildness was in no way a negative thing, but it was a beautiful thing. He was great with children. He was great with visitors. It was almost as if he was getting so much satisfaction from his life that he could tolerate and even put up with us as human beings when we were all in the house for too long. He was patient because he knew his time was coming. He could get out there and do stuff in a good way. It's like he never wandered. And I look back on Scout and I think about him, and I think about how so many people I've worked with over the years have been on that same journey and have reached that same place that Scout has, a place of contentment, knowing that they're in relationship with something that's the source of all life. And relationship, not necessarily in the academic or informational sense, but relationship in the way that we are related to our dogs or our cats, where we have a familiar feeling when we see the song sparrow. Every single day when we walk outside on our way to the car, we have that opportunity to make that relationship with that song sparrow. And we have that opportunity to make that relationship with the tree that we pass by every day. It's really a matter of stopping and taking some time and giving it a little attention in little doses until we begin to build a feeling. that makes me want to greet someone. If I walk down a city street and I don't know anyone, I'm not really inclined to want to say hi to everybody I pass. But when I see somebody that I know, I want to stop and say hello. And I want to exchange a little energy with that person. A little greeting, a little friendliness, a little eye contact, just a moment of relationship shared and celebrated. And in that same way, when I walk on my land here, where I live now in California, when I hear that winter wren make a little sound over by the woodshed, I want to stop and I want to see if I can see him or her for a second and just make eye contact for a second, say hello. Or I walk out my back door and the hummingbird is visiting the hanging plant, visiting the flower there, and I just want to stand there and watch for a second. Yeah, I can get to the office. I know I have something to do over there. It's going to take me a few seconds to walk over there, and I'm going to lose a few seconds right now, but am I really losing those seconds? I had such an enjoyable time in the 30 seconds that I interacted with that hummingbird this morning. I kind of forgot what I was doing. Where was I going? And then I remembered, oh yeah, I'm going over to the office to get something for this very recording. But I stood there and had a moment of just total gratitude and happiness to greet a friend, the hummingbird that comes to visit that flower every day. And I think 30 years from now when I look back, I can remember that moment with that hummingbird as a very distinct moment. It's not lost in my workday. Maybe you heard the Stellar's jays if you were really listening just now. You can hear them past the background hiss of this tape. Maybe you heard a little sound, and I hear that Stellar's jay and his brothers and sisters a lot here, and I know when they have to say something that gets my attention. They tell me when the hawk is flying in the yard, and that's not just an idea. That's a reality. They make a very particular sound when the hawk is flying, and it calls my attention and brings me out of my thoughts, provided I create a little bit of a muscle memory around the Stellar's jay, provided I create a little muscle memory around the winter wren, around the hummingbird, around the direction of the wind, around the sound of the stream that's still flowing in the drought. We just build these relationships because your dog won't let you ignore her or him when you walk through the door. You know that. The dog's going to make sure that you greet. Hello, I'm here. Lick, whine, whatever. You got to stop and reconnect with your dog. Even if you just went outside for 5 minutes and came back in, you got to stop and reconnect with your dog. It might be easier for us to keep relationships with nature if the trees would do that to us too every time we walked outside, but they don't. And it's up to us to find ways, meaningful ways, to build those relationships back in. It's not a question of whether or not there's value in those relationships. Those relationships are a source of nutrition. There's no question as to whether or not we need those relationships. It's obvious now. Thank you, Richard Louv. Thank you for your book that tells us about nature deficit disorder. Finally, people are saying, yeah, there's something to this. But it's not the information that we gain about the animal on the website that's going to bring us that relationship with nature. That's just information about nature. We can really use that website to gain a lot of strength in building relationships, but it's not about information, it's about relationship. And this whole series, is about reclaiming our relationships with nature. And we're going to do that in many different ways as we sit together. Maybe, we all talked about it this morning, and I'm sitting here right now with an audience, and this audience came out for this recording session, and a lot of them I know from a long, long time. I met a new friend today who lives nearby, but a lot of people I've known for many years, and we've been on this journey of nature mentoring together for a long time, and so it's really a great thing to be sitting here, but we all thought about you too. You, the listener, we thought, over the last 10 years, Native Eyes, between 1997 and 2007, has been listened to by over 30,000 people or so, and some people have told us they've listened to that series, that audio series, over 200 times. I was kind of shocked when I heard that. But, I thought one of the things that really meant a lot to me was how much people appreciate it that we took the time to create this opportunity for them, because when they're in traffic and they're sitting in their cars and they're listening, it really makes a difference. And so maybe you're in your car right now and we're all thinking of you. And we all talked about it before we started this session. We're really thinking about you, and we really do want to offer something to you and to let you know that we're here and that we're on this journey with you, and know that this is right now just a moment in time. It's not really just a moment in time, and that every generation from here on has to know how to help their children reconnect with nature again if they've lost that connection, so that they can have the optimal health. And it won't be long before everyone knows this, and that it's all around the world. People are realizing, just like they know now calcium, they take it for granted. Yes, you have to eat good food in order to be healthy. You need to exercise in order to be healthy. People are going to be saying you need to be connected to nature in order to be healthy. And right now we're on the early side of the curve right now. Nobody exactly knows what that means yet. What does it mean to be connected with nature? How do we evaluate whether or not we are? Well, hopefully we can start that conversation with some helpful tools, because 25 years of experience has shown me a few things about connection with nature, but more so, if it was just me, I wouldn't trust myself. There are so many hundreds of people out there working with these tools and feeding back to each other and sharing information that now I feel like I can share these with confidence and know that they'll be valuable to you. Otherwise, I wouldn't waste my time or yours. I just want to make sure that we do the best we can to share things for you, to help you on your journey, and maybe to help you reconnect a little bit more soundly, so you have more health and vitality in your life, and that you can bring this to your families too. And so that's what we all wish for you, that we can remember our connection to nature and become members of the natural community again.